I've seen worlds burning, and I've seen gods bleed. I've seen stars falling, and I've watched the dead sun rising. So now I'm alone. Now I can think for myself. About little deals and issues, and things that I just don't understand. Like a white lie that no, or a slight touch at times. I don't think it meant anything to you. up, see how it plays for you. I watch you keep your life there at a bar. In a box, I send it back to you. What have you become? A shadow of me. Fall like a picture in my head. Fall like a roof. Like the life you are losing. Box, how has the world gone? That they win the back and things that you're out. A change in a box, while people get so wrong. We can never move on. Fall like rain on the ground, moving along like a picture of life. Fall like tears on an ocean, drown in a rage like a poisoned emotion. Do you fall like fading desire, lost in a light from God or Messiah? Do you fall like rain on the fire, coming along like a picture of God? Do you fall like a like the life you are losing?
Hello and welcome to the All Saints Basement Sessions in association with Create Britain GQ. My name is Christopher Tubbs and today I have a particularly famed composer, performer and musician. He is of course Mr. Gary Numan. How are you?
I'm great, actually.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, I think it's probably a good idea to kind of start right at the beginning. Start back in sort of not West London, but Western England. You've got the West in your blood, haven't you?
I'm born in Hammersmith, so
Yeah.
West London is pretty close, yeah.
So did you come from a kind of musical background, a musical environment when you were growing up?
Not really. No, I had a cousin who was a guitar player, but only as a hobby, and I had an uncle that was a drummer. He played in bands around Germany and so on, so I did a little bit of touring in his younger days, but nothing much. Certainly my mum and dad were nothing to do with music at all.
So how did you find yourself involved in it?
Actually, it was more to do with technology. When I was quite small, there was somebody on the television, I don't know, Hank Marvin, one of that old lot.
Yeah.
And I was really fascinated with the fact that his guitar was electric and you had to plug it in, it had dials and switches. So my initial interest in music wasn't actually musical at all, it was a technology thing, which the fact that I got into synthesizers later on sort of resonates with me quite a bit. So for quite a long time, music was a byproduct of my interest, which was electric technology. Guitars and the noises that they made. So I was very much interested in noise and sound creation rather than music, so I never really got very good. Still not. I've never really learned how to play anything particularly well, because I'm more interested in noises as opposed to
Sonics.
technique. You know,
Right.
Yeah. No, somebody said play a blues scale in G. Not a clue. Not a clue at all. But make an interesting noise out of an exhaust pipe of a car, and I'll be out there, tapping it and doing all sorts of things. And that's always been where I've come from, musically.
I mean, in that respect, I mean, when did you discover sampling? Because that must have been of great interest to you, the fact that you could sample anything. And
Well, we were doing that sort of thing way back before samplers were invented. You'd make tape loops. So you'd go out with a little recorder, and you'd find a bit of concrete, you'd drag it along the floor, and you'd record it into a cassette player.
Yeah.
Take that back to the studio, record it onto your 1/4 inch or whatever, 1/2 inch, whatever, mainly 1/4 inch. Make a loop of it, and then you would work out what the tempo was of that, and then you'll clock your song onto that. This is all before MIDI and before any of the machines were talking to each other. So it was all very Heath Robinson, really, all a little bit sort of slapdash, but it did work of a fashion. Yeah, many times you'd see these big long tape loops running around the studio with bobbins and things hanging off them to try to keep tension. And it was doing pretty much what samplers then did very, very easily. So when sampling came along, for us, for some of the people that have been doing that sort of thing for a while, it was putting a very difficult process into a nice little box, and it all began very easily. But as a way of working, we'd actually been doing it for years before that.
so how did you sequence things? If you were, because it was this pre-sequencer, obviously.
Yeah.
And you were just using analog synths. How did it all work? Was it literally, as you say, recording a? How did
You played
work?
it.
Just literally, that was that.
God forbid.
What the?
You actually played it in, and if you got it out of time, you played it again. But normally, you were pretty good at playing stuff in time. And you worked with real drummers. Sometimes you tend to go in and out of time anyway, so you just went with it. But it was tricky. Once you started using sampling and things that were linked or tied to a particular rhythm, then you needed a particularly good drummer.
Yeah,
So
no, exactly.
I was lucky. I've always been very lucky. I've had drummers that can lock onto it really well. The one I've got now, Richie, is amazing, because everything is synced now.
So going back to the late 70s when you were, 20 years old in 1978, the era of punk.
Yeah.
Did that resonate with you, that period?
I loved it for the excitement, and I loved it for, this is punk, yeah, and I loved it for the opportunities that came with it. Musically, not a lot really. I liked the Sex Pistols. I thought they were pretty cool, but I didn't rate the others very much. I was never a Clash fan, for example, which is sacrilege. But I didn't really get into that side of it at all. Really liked the Sex Pistols. Went to see them once or twice, but it was as an opportunity, a time of opportunity. It was amazing. There were new record companies springing up in every street corner. There were dozens and dozens of them. And I recognised that and saw it. And so I started a punk band, went all through that process to try to get a contract. But for me, it was a mercenary move. It wasn't a love of the music at all. It was seeing it as an opportunity, doing it to open a door. And then when the door is opened, you start to do what you want to do.
Because those original demos came out later, didn't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Did you retrospectively kind of, are there bands that you didn't feel at the time that you retrospectively like now from that period?
No. No.
Consistent.
Just the same thing. Yeah. I sadly, I have a very limited taste in music, which I'm ashamed of, because as a songwriter, you need to have a broader taste as possible, so that you can bring in as many ideas as possible and filter them into your own music. And so I think it's a limitation, clearly, having a very narrow taste in music. But unfortunately, I do. I like very little music, actually. There's a few bands that I really love, and the rest I kind of can take or leave, really. And I wish I wasn't like that.
But that kind of purity of vision, that sort of like, I don't know, like, I don't call it industrial minimalism, but that it's become iconic. It's become, so adhesively related to who you are and the way people perceive you, especially young generation of musicians now. Does it feel strange to be such a huge influence to so many of the younger generations?
It does really. I sort of think back to some early reviews that I got, which were pretty harsh. Yeah, like 0 out of 10, and really bad stuff. And so I've never thought of myself in that way. I've always, for the first half of the career particularly, I had a particularly difficult time with the press and music press particularly. And so I've never thought of myself as being anything special at all. My whole success when it first came along was very much to do with being in the right place at the right time, and a couple of decisions that were made. That they made a picture disc of my third or fourth single, I think, the first one that did really well. And I was a completely unknown band then. I'd had no success whatsoever. So for the parent record company to make that decision was quite a big thing to do. And I don't know who made that decision. I never did find out. But that really helped me to get to a certain level. And in Top of the Pops at the time, we're doing a thing called Bubbling Under, or they would take a record outside of the chart. And they chose me because my band was called Tube Army, and I thought it was an interesting name. That's luck. So I became successful. Very little to do with the music, really. I was a gimmick. And so so I get to number one and it's all massive and everyone's going, oh, you must be really big-headed. No, not at all. I just thought, how lucky was that? I just felt lucky. Even Our Friends Electric, it's 2 songs stuck together because I couldn't figure out how to finish them.
I think you're being incredibly modest.
It's true though.
But, I mean, how at the time you had all these bands with this kind of fervent political anger, etc. And you had this sort of almost kind of like what seems to me sort of disaffected, kind of almost like isolationist kind of vibe going on. Where did that come from?
Asperger's. I got Asperger's, so it's how I related to the world. I got Asperger's and I was young. I mean, I was 21 when it first happened, but I was quite naive and innocent. So effectively, I was like a teenager in a 21-year-old body. So I had all the angst and problems that teenagers tend to have. Plus, I've got Asperger's, so it's not a good combination, really.
So how did that manifest itself?
I was isolated and
right.
the whole image thing, everything, the music, everything that I did, the way I presented myself, it's all wrapped up in this feeling of being disconnected from everybody else, to not relating to people in general, let alone individuals, but just not being comfortable with people.
It's been very difficult dealing with the press and having to promote yourself.
The funny thing about Asperger's is on a one-to-one level, it's actually quite easy, especially in an interview, because in an interview you're talking mainly about yourself. It's when I start talking about something else, I crumble.
Right.
But when I'm talking about myself in situations like this, I can talk for England. I can talk for hours. It's actually quite easy, but talk to me about something else and I go, and I don't know what to say. I have a system. I'm really bad with eye contact, and I know that if I count 3 seconds and then 5 now, actually, 5 seconds. 5 seconds is too long, 3 seconds is probably too short.
Right.
3 seconds I'm not interested enough, 5 seconds I'm being weird, and I count. And
right,
it's, and I have all sorts of mechanical procedures that I've adopted over the years that get me through conversation and things like that.
That's
My wife is brilliant. She's got a brother that's got Asperger's, and she's helped me massively. But when she's not there, if we're out anywhere and she goes to the bar or goes to talk, whatever it is, I panic. I very quietly panic, and I'm looking for her all the time coming back, because she guides me through interacting.
Fantastic to have that reference.
Yeah. I'm a sit in the corner, look down at the floor sort of bloke if she's not there. If she's there, she helps me to interact at a reasonable level.
So how do you find, performing live in that respect in front of large amounts of people? That's that's a different kind of communication, but how does Asperger's affect that?
It's not a problem. It's, the larger the place, the easier it is, because the larger the place, the further away people are, the less eye contact there is, which is a real problem for me. Do you know, I've had things happen down the front at shows. And one particular well-known one was some girl took all her kit off and was running up and down the pit, and the band were all, I never saw it. I don't look here. I'm looking about a third of the way back, round about where the lights and the smoke merge into a faceless area. And that's where I'm looking. Because if I make eye contact with people, it throws me, puts me out my stride a little bit.
Right.
So I tend to not look too much. I'm better now than I used to be, but certainly in the early days, this was absolute no-go area, this bit down here.
Now you're someone who, you've been in the industry for 30 years, and you've seen huge transitions in the recording industry. You kind of came up when there was still money to be made. What was it like as a young man, suddenly finding this sort of pop stardom and being thrown on the road and having to create all these different mechanisms to deal with it?
It's a bit tricky. It's on the one hand, it is the most amazing thing to go through. As an experience, it's everything you've ever dreamed of. Everything. I can't speak highly enough. Becoming a pop star is great, but it comes with a price, which some people deal with very well, and I'm very impressed with those people that do that. And some other people struggle with it a bit more. I've always had my feet very firmly on the ground, so I never had those sort of star trippy problems, luckily, because that would have made it worse. But I think when it happens very quickly, it's more difficult, because you adjust overnight, really. When you go from being absolutely unknown to known everywhere, all over the world, in the space of 2 or 3 weeks, that's a lot of adjusting to do quickly. I think it's worse if you're a single act rather than the band, because it all falls on your shoulders. I was with a very new record company that had no success before, so there was no one there to sort of guide you through it. I didn't have a manager even when it first happened.
Really?
So I was pretty much on my own. You should talk to my dad about stuff. What do you think, Dad? Who had no experience of it either. So difficult, but amazingly exciting at the same time. So everything sort of balances out in a way. I wouldn't change it. I did say some pretty stupid things, understandably perhaps, and I made some bad decisions, which everyone will. Some of which have hurt me for a long time. Some of them haven't. But I wouldn't change any of it.
I take it you're talking about sort of political affiliations and things like that. Supporting the Conservative Party.
Yeah, I should never have said that. And I retired, apparently. I wanted to get out of it for a bit. I blamed touring and all of my problems in dealing with it all. I tended to blame touring, so I said I was going to pack that up. And I did for a bit. And I didn't realise the way it would be perceived at the time.
Right.
Because for me, it was actually a very sensible thing to do, because I did need to, it was all mental. And I needed to just back off and go, whoa, let's calm this down and see what's going on. I wanted my songwriting to be better, and I couldn't because I was out on the road all the time, and I really wanted to just concentrate on what was important. But I think the fans took that as if I just stuck my 2 fingers up at them and turned my back on them, and I didn't think about that.
It's sort of a catch-22 though, isn't it? It's a pretty hard situation to be. It's a classic situation, isn't it?
Yeah,
on the road,
yeah.
Not being in the studio, not writing.
And I understand now. I understand the way it was perceived. I even understand the press hostility to a little bit. And I know that's much better now. I don't have those problems anymore. But I think if I'd been a bit more mature, then a lot of that wouldn't have happened.
Atheism is another thing that's kind of I think quite a positive thing, actually. It's just been a foundation of what you've done over the years. But how do you view this kind of, there's been a huge increase in popularity in atheism, especially in the UK in the last kind of 10 years. How do you view sort of Christopher Hitchens and this new wave of popularity for atheism?
Oh, atheism. Well, that's a good thing as well as I'm concerned. If religion gives people comfort, then I have no problem with it at all. But it oversteps its bounds too many times and interferes and tries to influence and corrupt. And I'm very much against that. So the more people that see it for the rubbish that it is, then the more realistic we are as a people.
So what kind of themes are you covering in your new album? Dead
I'm not allowed to to sing about God anymore. I've been banned from it. I've become a bit one-dimensional, I have to say. So I don't mind that. So this new one is there. I'm in the process of trying to write a sci fantasy, which is different. A science fantasy novel, which is an ongoing, never-ending, silly project. But there's a few songs that have been derived from ideas for that. One called Death and Rising is one of them. There's a couple of things about relationships. There's another one, a big fallout of a friend of mine a few years back, which has unfortunately continued. So there's one about that. So it's slightly more varied than previous 2 or 3 albums have been, which have been a bit anti-God, and stuck in that, really, stuck in that.
And so it's out on September the 12th, and you're going to be touring it?
Yeah, we're doing a mini tour, 6 or 7 shows in September. And then I go back in the studio to carry on with the new album proper, which is called Splinter, which is coming out next year. And then I go out again in December for another mini tour to do like a second round of Death Sun Rising stuff. And then it's back in the studio, finish off Splinter. And then next year is pretty much devoted to touring the Splinter album everywhere, the whole world.
So what's touring like these days for you? Is it a far more sort of urbane affair? Kind of.
I love it, actually. I mean, it's over the years as I've become more experienced at it. So the confidence has come, which I didn't have for the first few years. And it's just a very cool thing to do. You know, you're my band are my closest friends. So you're in a bus, lovely bus, touring all over the world with your best mates, doing shows every night in all these lovely places. It doesn't have a bad side.
Fantastic.
So many people talk about splitting up on tour, and I don't get it. I love it. I love it.
So how long have you been playing with your current band for?
The core of them, 16, 17 years or more. There's a little bit of coming and going, obviously, but the main's, a long time.
So you've taken the ride together, kind of thing.
Yeah. I've never auditioned anyone, actually. An audition for me isn't about whether they play, it's about whether we get on. So that I just invite people around the house for the afternoon, and if we get on, then they're in. You just assume they can play. I've never actually listened to anyone play first, which is not very clever, really.
How did you feel about being sampled by the Sugar Babes and this sort of recurrent interest?
No, it's great. I had no problem with that at all. I think a number of people, when it happened, a number of people spoke to me, and they expected me, I think, to slag it, and sort of not be happy about it. But I loved it. I thought it was a great track. I'm really pleased they used it. I thought my part of it was the music, obviously, because the vocal is somebody else's. It wasn't my original vocal. And I thought the track sounded great, 25 years after it was first made. So I was really proud of it. And then after that, or around about the same time as that, you had people like 9 Inch Nails doing covers, and Marilyn Manson. That's right. Foo Fighters, all kinds of really cool people as well. So from a songwriting point of view, I was really proud of it, because I had Sugar Babes over here, Armand Van Helden and blah, 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 right around to 9 Inch Nails over here. So I was covering a fairly wide spectrum of culture, of music. Yeah. So, from a songwriting point of view, I was really proud of that. Really, really, still am. It happens now.
Absolutely should be.
No, I've not taken it for granted at all. I'm still blown away when it happens.
So, of course, you're collaborating as well. You've got collaboration with Battles.
Yeah, it's just come out. Started talking to them sort of towards the end of last year. They came to see me in Boston when we was touring America, and it's an idea that's progressed since then. And they did a video for it a few weeks back in Los Angeles. It's just lovely. It's nice to work with people that are kind of inventive and doing something a bit out of the mainstream. If you're going to do a collaboration, that's kind of what you're looking for, really.
And what about, on the sort of the leisure end of things? Do you still fly?
No, not now. I've got 3 children. And I was an air display pilot, you see, so I used to do low-level aerobatics and all that. And you teach that for a bit. I was what they called an evaluator, which means I would watch other people and make sure they were good enough, then I'd have to write their ticket, so to speak. So I got quite good at it towards the end, and loved it very, very much. But pretty much every friend that I had, except for a couple, were all killed in different crashes, and it changed, what was very exciting, and you felt part of an elite, and it was a very ego massaging thing to be a part of, and I did love it. It went from that slowly to being something quite sad, actually. And you miss people. You think, oh, you look around for people and think, oh no, he went down. And then Gemma didn't want me to do it anymore because of a particular accident of a friend of ours. And it all just went away. And then the children come along, and I thought it was just
Of course.
too dangerous, really. I do miss it, though.
I bet you do.
Yeah, miss it.
Yeah, my dad was a pilot until we came along, and he had to dump it as well.
Really?
Yeah. He was miserable for years about it.
It's a big part of your life. For me, it's an obsession, an absolute obsession. You know, there was a time in the 90s when the music career was doing not very well at all. I was dead and buried, really. But the flying side of things are doing better and better. I was doing more and more air shows, becoming more and more well known, more as a pilot than as a musician. And where your kind of self-esteem is sucked away as something fails, so it was being built up for something I was doing well at, and it's sort of that balancing again. And for a while it was really important to me. It sort of kept me feeling positive about life and so on. So then as the music went into this renaissance period that I'm kind of still enjoying at the moment, so the flying backed off a little bit and balance was maintained, as they say. But it's an amazingly exciting thing to do. I mean, you're upside down 50 feet off the ground and your face is doing that, and you make a mistake and you're dead. Yeah. The worst that happens on stage is you get embarrassed. That's it. That's the challenge. Not much of a challenge, really. But, you know, I used to fly World War II airplanes as well. Yeah, so a real handful. Good fun.
What's, you've always had a very distinct, strong look, fashion-wise. And how much do you think, well, you have.
Some good, some bad, yeah.
Hey, we all have our moments. But, how important has that been to your kind of, I don't know, your brand? I hate using the word brand, but you know what I mean. Do you take an active interest in fashion?
Less now probably than I did when I started. Yeah, when I started, it was a vitally important part of what I was doing. I used to see the way you looked in conjunction with the on-stage performance, the lighting, the music, the covers, the album covers, even what you said in interviews, all integrated. Like the cogs of a machine, they all have to be working and going in the right direction. If one of those doesn't work, it jams up the whole machine and it all falls apart. And I felt very strongly about that for quite a few years. These days, I have a similar kind of attitude. I still think it's all very, very important, but my look has become more generic than a particular image for each album. I used to change image for every album that I made, and after a while that became a bit tedious for a start, and arguably unnecessary, as the music itself found its sort of direction and so on. This is more the last sort of 10 or 15 years, I suppose. So it's still very important to me, but I no longer go from image to image, from one album to another.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today.
Pleasure.
I really appreciate it, and best of luck with the new record and of course the new tour.
Yeah, thank you.
Gary Numan, thank you very much.
Cheers, thank you. It's cold outside, and the paint's building up on my walls. There's a man outside in a long coat grid, smoking a cigarette. See you. and think for myself about little deals and issues and things that I just don't understand. Like a white light at night, or a sly touch at times. And I don't think it meant anything to you. So you open the door. It's a friend that I left in the hallway. Please sit down. A candlelit shadow on the wall by that bed. See, so I find out your reason for the phone calls and smiles. And it hurts and I'm lonely. I should never have tried. And I missed you tonight. So it's time to leave. You see, this means everything to me.